SPV wrote under the caption, "In search for son-in-law." Perhaps in the Madras of 1930s, the conditions have not changed much. Now there is a great demand for working girls who prefer broad-minded boys. I will proceed with his write-up. Nothing shatters a man's nerves to pieces so much as the search for a son-in-law. Sons-in-law, no doubt, lie scattered everywhere. Otherwise, most of our girls would remain unmarried, which is never the fate of any girl in the Hindu society. Every seshi gets somehow mated to some session, and then they will put on as best as they may. They will put on as best as they may. But the trouble is in the preliminary picking and choosing. The one comfort about sons-in-law is that they are purchasable if you will pay their price. I have never known any respectable would-be son-in-law that is not willing to be purchased, that would not walk straight into the shop room and sit under a glass case. Most of them are even anxious to be auctioned. But the discomfort about the business is that there is not any one place where they are all gathered, labeled according to their quality, ticketed with their prices and catalogued for reference, so that a man from his sitting room may send for a catalogue and choose one out of it, as his wife does an addi guy by looking into Orr's catalogue. Remember, I am talking of the Tamil Nadu or Madras of 1930s. I have a great respect for Messrs. Spencer and Co. Madras, Bangalore and Uttarakhand. I doubt if there is any firm in the whole world which has exploited all the needs of a man or woman and catered to his or her every want as this firm does. You may buy from it anything from motor cars to medicines, from rifles to bath buns, cots, cushions, aerated waters, perfumery, books, anything that may seize your fancy, even at odd moments of your life. It would be impossible to conceive of anything that a man wants to buy outside the shopping activities except perhaps a son-in-law. And I have always wondered how the business possibilities of this commodity have escaped the enterprise of that firm. There really cannot be much of a trouble about it. It involves only the printing of a catalogue. Instead of low slung, all steel body, 6 cylinders, drought proof windscreens, novel dashboard, hydrostatic petrol gauge, engine thermometer, and so on, all that it has got to say is figure as in photograph, 5 feet 4 inches, 33 inches round the chest, good physique, perfectly quiet and enjoyable if treated liberally with money or frequent presents. SSLC. Price rupees 2,500 in cash and rupees 1,500 in silverware. That is in those days. Or 5 feet 1 inch, 34 inches round chest, instead of soft-soiled, slightly pockmarked and squint in the eye, but enhancing the beauty. Senior BA, price rupees 4,000 cash, rupees 1,500 in silverware. Or on the installment system, figure as in the photograph. In the BL, hopes of High Court judgeship, price rupees 5,000 down and EC payments as follows: rupees 1,000 on Avaniyavattam, rupees 1,500 Diwali, rupees 2,500 at nuptials. To and fro second class fares according to civil service regulations on occasions of trips to receive presents and installments and so on. Perhaps some of you think that I have overdrawn the picture, or worse, that I am indulging in a coarse and vulgar jest. Not a bit of it, my dear gentlemen, as sincerely as I am alive. If you have a daughter for whom you have been shopping for a son-in-law for 3 years consecutively, not finding one within your means, you should have gathered about you by that time a list of all the sons-in-law available in the world, together with a supplement revised cash year of sold outs and fresh consignments that you may now go in for the costliest article and recoup the loss by helping for a trifle other shop walkers of your kind. They will gratefully appreciate your industry with thanks, which only shows the real need there is for a catalog. Already, necessity has in the last few years brought into existence an agency going by the name of marriage brokers. Some, of course, take the more dignified appellation of commission agents, but they are yet a disorganized lot with no business premises of their own, where you can call and gauge the albums, that are of the peddler variety, going from day to door, with no more character than that of a peddler, and endowed with all of his perseverance. I am reminding you of the Madras of 1930s. They are a shrewd class of people. They can spot you in a crowd even if they had never set eyes on you before. Perhaps fathers of unmarried daughters have a telltale hangdog face about them, particularly distinguishable from the rest of careworn community. At the flower bazaar, as you go with a brief bag in your hand, ruminating seriously on the philosophy of life and the inexorable doctrine of karma, somebody taps you. When you come into town, you gaze vacantly, not having seen the man before. Sir, has your daughter been married? No. And wonder how the blazes he got to know that you have a daughter to marry. Would you care to consider an offer, sir? There are, of course, more of them too. Offer is the word, and appropriate too. It has become perfectly vernacularized in connection with marriage. Would you care to consider an offer? Your eyes sparkle. Of course, you'd care. And then you get into very intimate and confidential relations with the man. You hire a taxi and fly along the streets, coming across scores of sons-in-law exposed for the season. Some sons-in-law are seasonal. If you miss a season, you can't catch them until the next. You may as well go hunting after mango fruits in November. You interview several parents. Of course, you never talk to the son-in-law himself directly at any time, not see him except through the end of your eye while he is stringing a tennis racket somewhere in the house, or keeps playing with the baby as if he is not in the least interested in your visit or in what is going on in the house. Often you are carrying on negotiations, taking the next door boy as your would-be son-in-law. You ascertain from each offer what has to be known, primarily acquainting yourself first in a rough and vague way what is the bargain. Gather up all the horoscopes and shoving them into your brief bag, flee home at 12 o'clock in the night, promising each of them separately to consider the matter overnight with your wife. These offers, when analyzed, fall into one or other of a few types. First, the educated parent, often your school or class fellow, with amiable and sweet in manners, overflowing with courtesy and kindness, and as he gives himself out, quite an idealist for the purity of society. You meet him and talk of good old days, of college and of cricket, and unanimously agree that you are never going to have such jolly old times again. Gone, my fellow, again. Gone, my fellow, gone. When we are going to have them again? Never, not unless we are born again, with a pathetic touch of sweet sadness, followed by reverential silence for full 5 minutes, during which time both of you look appropriately sad in memory of old departed days. You break the tension. You have got a son of marriageable age, haven't you? Yes, I have got a daughter. What do you think of an alliance? What do I think? Why? What should I think? It would be about the jolliest thing in the world, seeing what we were to each other in our younger days, and you agree that nothing happier can fall upon you both, and that heaven itself would bless it. You, however, are anxious to know where you are. Now about the business part of it, my fellow, the terms. You can obviously see him fly into a rage. Terms? What terms? I don't know when our people will have sense and not make bargains of marriages. I at least will set my face firmly against it. No terms, my man, absolutely none. You do what you please, and I do what I can. That's it. Of course, I know you, old fellow, don't I? But the woman at home, you see, what about the woman? In my house, the woman is as man says. Besides, you don't know my wife. Of course, how should you know his wife? You feel a heavy load taken off your head. You are actually in inward raptures at such an easy conclusion of the matter. You make an appointment with your friend that his wife should come and see your daughter next evening at 5 o'clock. The whole of the next day you are anxiously expectant. You sit in your easy chair in the outer veranda and scrutinize every car and jet car passing by the road. You go in and come out of your house for nothing in particular. Your daughter keeps flitting about, decked in as much superfluous clothing and jewelry as can take away her natural beauty and sweetness. Your wife dons her best clothes and diamonds and appears so charming and superb that you are seized with an osculatory desire of an irresistible kind, which, of course, you have no chance of satisfying on account of her being so busy and the boys and girls running about everywhere in the house. Your little son, 8 years old, keeps worrying you with questions about when they would come and why they have not come. You hear a lot of the horn at the turning into your street. If it is day, yes, it is day. Your son runs into the house and bawls out rather indiscreetly, "They have come, mother, they have come," and runs out again to see the visitors. Your wife bustles, puts away some things and fetches out some other things. The car draws in front of your house, from which alight one woman and 3 girls, all gorgeously attired and exhibiting becoming modesty at sight of you standing in the veranda. They go in and are received at the kudam, where they sit and talk. Outside,